Morning, everyone. Freddie here. So the last video I just posted yesterday was kind of introducing this idea, this direction in the renewal compass that I talk about, called reorient. So reorient, just to for those of you who don't know, reorient just simply means like when things feel off course in your life or your work or just even creatively. I think sometimes we have a tendency to uh, want to quit or want to, you know, try to, or we like maybe even sell out in some ways to like the thing that's not the dream, or whatever the case. And I think there is a really important step when you reach a certain point. Sometimes that's especially after like a massive frustration, or a very pivotal moment in your life, where you kind of have to face like, oh, I don't know if this is the thing that I was hoping for. And I've reached a lot of those points in my life, especially professionally. And I wanted to just kind of speak into this step called reorient. So it's it is what it sounds like. It is about reorientation. It's about uh, making sure that you evaluate some of the major areas of your life and just try to make sure nothing's misaligned, or whatever is misaligned, you try to refine, and realign those things. And so I think for me, there's in the most recent years, there's been very pivotal moments, um, because it's not this like, uh, it's not the same thing as like when you're in school and you have these like kind of milestones that you kind of hit, because sometimes that feels a little more structured and kind of what the education system has brought on. But I think in personal life, creative life, and obviously professional life, that it can be kind of a roller coaster. And so in my story, in recent years, I had very two big moments in my life. So one is I was working for a church, a little bit before the pandemic and kind of through the pandemic, which was crazy enough to do ministry in during COVID. But I was basically, I had my heart set on getting to this place of like a pastoral position, like a leadership position, but within the creative ministry. And I kind of thought I was on my way there, and I thought if I just like keep strapping my boots down, if I keep working really hard, that would follow through. And when it didn't, for whatever reason, uh, it kind of stopped me in my tracks, um, and it kind of like messed with me, and kind of made me question a lot of things. And eventually, I moved on to another opportunity, and went on to work for a design studio. And it's good people, but eventually, probably over a year in, I still felt something was off. Like it was like I feel like at that time in this design studio, I feel like I had done some of my best work, creatively. Like some of the brands that I felt really proud of, some of the websites I felt really proud of, and things like that. But something still like in me was saying like, hey, there's something's like not like where I'm headed, and like it is not exactly what I pictured. Or maybe at one point I did want it, and then I realized maybe it wasn't all cut out to be, at least for me. And so at the time, there's at both times there were different hardships happening as well. There were things in just like life was happening as well, family stuff, and uh, you know, really, really difficult things that may make you kind of rethink and reevaluate. And I remember at one point, this was, I guess, back in 2023 or something like that. I was on my commute and I was listening to a podcast called Dadville. Shout out to Dave Barnes and John McLaughlin. And it is what it sounds like. It's, these two singer songwriters who I really admire. But they're also dads, and they also talk to other dads. And at the end of the show, they ask, a question kind of centered around like, it's a little morbid, but it's still like a really, really interesting thought where it's like, okay, well, if you were to pass away and you had your funeral, what would you want your kids to say about you? And what would you want your family to say about you? And after listening to a few episodes, I was like, man, I think maybe that's like the question I need to think about, because what I realized was that I needed to, and I had heard this from just other content I was kind of consuming as well at the time. It's that kind of question of like, okay, if you think about your funeral and you think about what your family's going to say and what your kids are going to say and your friends and your community, and you take that and you kind of ask yourself, what do I want them to say? What is, and for me, that was the question I needed to have a better understanding of where I needed to reorient, because I ended up asking myself, do I want my kids at my funeral to say, Dad worked really hard, and he worked a lot, and he, is that what I really want, or is it he loved me really well? And it's the same thing for my wife and for my friends and my community and the rest of my family. It's like I would love for them to say that no matter what I did, no matter what I was good at, no matter what fun thing I could create, or no matter how musically talented I was, or whatever it is, they could honestly say, that's all great, but this guy loved me so well and made me such a better person. And so I think for me, that felt more like, when I had that realization, I realized, oh, this is a good point of reference for me to understand the impact and the mark I want to make in my life. And so then I also thought, okay, how do I reverse engineer that? And when I started to dive deeper into that thought and I reverse engineered it, I realized that one of the things, as far as professionally, was that I wanted to chase a lot of things and a lot of ideas and things like that, and I think that it was just time, and so that was one thing. But then also making the jump and running my own business, my own creative business, has allowed me, it's still a little bit of a grind, but like it allows me to like drop things when I need to and show up for my family and all that stuff. And so the big thing for me was that I also thought that it was really, really important for me to not only be able to show up for my family, but to also have a better understanding of, if the end goal here is for people to feel loved and known and seen by me, then I need to start to shape my life in a way that I can do that really well for everyone around me. And so I started to realize that, ironically, I'm in design. And so ironically, I I realized, oh, I can actually kind of maybe design this life that I've always dreamt of. And so for me, that started, a lot of you can probably guess, I'm a Christian, and so that started definitely with my faith and my walk with Jesus, and trying to work through some of that spiritual work. Also kind of coincided with some healing I needed to do, and some work I've needed to do in my own life. And then there's the other parts of it where, I took that picture of like, I want people to feel loved, and how do I integrate that into the rest of my life? And so I started to, sift through, okay, what does it look like for my like spiritual life and my heart and my soul? Sorry, I hit the mic. My heart and my soul, and what does it look like for like that to integrate into my mind and into my physical life, into my community. And so throughout the years, I've done work in all those areas, and by no stretch of the imagination is it perfect, but I think this really helped me because it gave me a vision for what I needed to do and how to reorient everything to that goal of, I just want everyone who knows me to feel so loved by me. And I think that's also part of this. Like Ready, Set, Freddy was not just this thing I decided to do, 2 weeks ago. This was something I've been wanting to do, and I think, it's fun to start the journey. And for those of you who are starting with me early, thank you. But it was just a little, for me, this was just a little walkthrough of like, hey, this is what it kind of looked like for me to start. And so for some of you, me and some friends are actually doing this right now. Shout out to Laura, Ben, and Sawyer. Like we're going through this exercise of like, okay, like what, what does vision look like for my life, both personally and business-wise and professionally. And if we can take that and imagine, unfortunately our funeral, like, because the reality is that's where we're all going to end up one day, and that sounds harsh and maybe a little sad, but like it's true. Like how do I get to the point where I can feel like I have done justice with the life and the cards that I've been dealt? And so then you start to ask all these different questions of like, okay, well, how does that affect my business? How does that affect how I interact with people? How does that affect where I'm headed in work? And things like that. And so I think once you answer that life or that question in the future, and then you can reverse engineer back and say, okay, now that I know this, how do I get there? And then you start changing those things. So for me, that was not only some career changes, but that was also even some physical changes. I realized there were things in my body physically that I was ignoring a lot. And as you can see, you probably noticed I have braces, so that's one thing. But there's also, other things. I changed the way I ate. I changed my diet. I was trying to consume less alcohol and less caffeine, and that's still a little bit of a struggle. But as you start to think about those things, you start to realize, like, in order for me to get there from a community sense, I need to make sure that the people around me that I'm surrounding myself with love me and believe in me and challenge me in healthy ways. I need to understand that like my habits might not be the healthiest. I need to understand that maybe I need some counseling. Maybe I need to learn how to like deal and manage stress and anxiety, or maybe I need to grow in my faith and in my spiritual life, and or just do some of the hard work that it all requires. Because what I've learned, and I learned this from a client that I recently she's a counselor, but she's also in integrative medicine. And I remember her pointing out to me that these 4 areas of life, the people in your life, but your body and your mind and your heart and soul, they're all tied together. And so when one of them is out of sync, one of them feels off, it can affect all of the other areas. And so this is why reorientation is so important, because it is a way for you to evaluate and reflect and realize when you need to, it's a good barometer and a good gauge on, hey, one of these areas is misaligned with the vision and even just my overall health. So how do I realign all that? And so that's a little bit of my own story, kind of just blabbing in the car while I get to work, but I kind of enjoy this because it just feels a little more natural for me. And so I would think about that if you are in a place where you feel a little stuck, or you feel lost, or you feel creatively dry, or whatever that is. You might need to consider maybe rest, like I've mentioned in all these other videos. But then you also might need to consider, how do I reorient and realign everything to who I'm becoming and who God is shaping me to be. Those are the things that I think are really important. And so if you are there, I would invite you to and encourage you to just go ahead and reorient yourself. You can start with rest. I think rest is always a good place to start because it kind of calms and pauses everything in your life for a second. But there's also a few videos and a few social posts that I'm doing to kind of help people run this kind of little reorientation matrix in their life. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope you have a great day. I know it's a longer video, but it's okay. I hope you feel encouraged. I hope today you find wonder and joy in your work and in your life.